Awesome. So welcome everyone. It's great to see you all. We're so excited to have you here for the how-to session for November on using popular education and organizing to build power. My name is Sachiko Osawa, and I'm the Community Practice and Membership Engagement Coordinator for the Leading Change Network, and I'm coming to you from Sweden. So as you're joining, I'd like to ask you to do two things. First, introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, and where you're from so we can know who's in the room. And also rename yourself on video. So you can do that by clicking on your lower left-hand corner of your video screen and choosing rename. And it's so wonderful to see all of you from different parts of the world. This is amazing. All right, so as you're all renaming yourself and introducing yourself, let me begin by introducing Leading Change Network, who we are and what we do. I know that for some of you, it's very familiar. Others are joining us for the first time. So the Leading Change Network, or LCN, is a global community of organizers, educators, and researchers. We develop and support new civic leadership that organizes communities to build power and create change. There are people all over the world using the LCN pedagogy, which was developed by Marshall Gantz and Associates to create change in their communities. And rather than having these people work alone, we want them to come together and learn from each other so that they can organize more effectively. And we do this through 4 programs. First, create opportunities to learn the organizing pedagogy. Second, provide coaching and support for leaders to build successful campaigns on the ground. Third, create spaces of learning like this one for members to learn from each other and their best practices and challenges and innovations. And finally, support leaders to educate others in their community. And we're most importantly a member-driven organization with currently over 350 members from 49 countries and over 6,000 subscribers. And as a member, you're part of an amazing global community that you can connect with and learn from. You'll have access to exciting learning events such as this one, various training and learning resources, and opportunities to get coaching. So if you're already trained in the pedagogy and are not yet a member, we invite you to become one from our website. If you haven't been trained in the pedagogy yet, you can subscribe from the website and sign up to get information about our introductory organizing courses and sessions, which will be happening in January. So here's what today's session looks like. We'll start off with a quick relationship building and breakout rooms. Then Rahaf will present about her work with popular education and organizing, which is the meat of the session. And afterwards, we'll open it up for questions from you all, followed by a quick discussion, and conclude with a quick evaluation and announcement of what's coming up ahead. Now, I assume everyone is a Zoom expert by now, but just to do a quick recap on tech, you should be seeing a window that's similar to what's on this slide. The unmute button is on the lower left-hand corner of your video screen. So make sure that you're on mute when you're not speaking so that there's no audio disturbances. We would love to see you on video, so please keep it on as much as possible. This session will be recorded and shared on our website for our members. We'll also be taking screenshots during the session to share with our community afterwards. So if you don't want to appear on them, send us a private chat. As you know, Zoom has a great chat function, so we encourage you to use that to share questions, reflections, and resources with one another. Farah from Rahel will be our chat board monitor. Thanks, Farah, to raise any questions that you might have. And if you have any tech issues, please put in @tech and our colleagues will help you out. Now, I would like for us to do a quick exercise for us to get to know one another. So I think my colleagues are preparing breakout rooms right now. We have about 70 people registered for today from all over the world. So after this, we'll be invited to join breakout rooms in groups of 2s or 3s, where you have about 5 minutes to share the following: your name, your organization, where you're from. And in the spirit of today's session, since popular education is about reflecting on concepts, when is a moment, share a moment when you first learned about the concept of justice. How did you learn it? I'm really excited to see what people are going to be sharing in their breakout rooms. So once you come back, I love to have people share what they discussed in the chat. So when the breakout rooms open, you should see a prompt on your screen inviting you to join the breakout rooms. So please click on that. Please click on join when it appears. If you find yourself in a breakout room alone, don't panic, stay there. There's an ask for help button. So click on that and we'll go to help you out. And again, once you come back to the main room, be prepared to share what you discussed in the chat. All right, so I think we're ready to open the breakout rooms. Is Jaffrin here or Mice? Maybe you are too.
Yeah,
right.
Groups are open now. The prompt was received by people.
Fantastic. Happy relationship building. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice conversation with your partners. So I love to hear what you discussed, especially for the last questions around justice and when you learned it. So if you could take a moment to put it in the chat to share with all of us, that would be great. Right, so let's see if people are, let's wait until people are putting their things in the chat. Anne talks about the civil rights movement in the US as a child. Randall, as a kid, also about homeless people. And Santa Claus didn't do anything about it. Research around public narrative. It's super interesting, Amelia. Palestinian rights and the occupation. A lot of the stories around being a child and learning. This is very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing. So as people are sharing that, I want to talk about today's session, which everyone is excited about. So today's session is a how-to session, which is a learning space to bring in best practices and examples of how people are addressing common challenges around organizing and in their various contexts. And one of these questions is, how do we effectively enable people to overcome repression and disempowerment and take action effectively? So today we've invited Rahaf Abu Doha from AHEL in Jordan to share how they merged the popular education pedagogy pioneered by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire with community organizing practices in their campaign and organizing work. Rahaf is the lead public narrative and popular education trainer at AHEL. She has worked on non-formal educational programs since 2011 and joined AHEL's team to run the popular education program in the context of campaigns. Rahaf also worked in the field of youth work, facilitating open dialogue and learning spaces for the youth. And I personally have been so excited to make this session happen ever since I heard about their amazing work with popular education circles and the Stand Up with the Teachers campaign. So as you listen to Rahaf present, I encourage you to share questions, reflections, comments in the chat. We'll come back to them afterwards in the Q&A. So Rahaf, thank you for joining us today, and I would like to now hand it over to you. And I think you want me to keep on sharing the slides, right?
Yeah.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And thanks to LCN, Nice, and Sachiko for making this happen and all the preparations ahead. I joined AHEL in 2017, and AHEL is an organization that works on coaching campaigns in the MENA region. We coach campaigns, we work with campaigns using the community organizing methodology, and we also teach community organizing. We have an online course in Arabic for organizers from the Arab world, as well as our work on coaching campaigns. Today, I will be presenting more about our experience on popular education, and what to expect from this upcoming 30 minutes is why did AHEL decide to adopt popular education approach in the context of campaigns? what is popular education and how, what is its essence and how did we structure it in the context of Stand Up with the Teachers campaign. And at the end, we will have 30 minutes on Q&A. And as Sachiko said, if you have any question, never hesitate to put it in the chat, and Farah will share them with us later. So in the coming 2 to 3 minutes, I'm going to share the story behind why popular education. Since 2015, Ahel was coaching Stand Up with the Teachers campaign. It is a campaign led by women teachers who ask for their labor rights in Jordan. They work in private sector schools, and in 2017, there was a need for this campaign to expand. But then when we talked about expansion of the campaign, and when I'm talking expansion, I mean this campaign started in one city in Jordan. We wanted it to expand in more cities in Jordan because we have a lot of teachers in the countries who would be part, who we wanted to be part of the campaign. So what happened is we, next slide, please. Once we started talking about recruitment and expanding the campaign to more cities, we met challenges. The main two challenges that we met were teachers are afraid to be part of such a campaign. They simply fear losing their jobs if they are part of a campaign. The other challenge was there is no sense of community and support amongst teachers. They simply don't trust each other. And if we look at these two challenges, they are always challenges that come along the way with long years of systematic oppression against them as teachers and so on. And then we started to ask ourselves, like, what is an action that we can do in order for this campaign to expand? An action where teachers won't feel afraid to be part of the campaign. And me, Nisreen, and Reem, we started talking about adult learning methodologies. And at that time, we read Paulo Freire's book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I personally read it 10 years ago, and I liked it. I liked what Paulo Freire said, and it helped me with my life as a person who works with youth and women. And that was our starting point. So we started from the book of Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Paulo Freire's approaches in emancipation and emancipatory learning. Next slide. As for the definition of popular education, there is no set definition of popular education. It has to achieve emancipatory learning. And what I'm going to focus on here is the essence of what we found when we were doing the research. In our research, we couldn't find any guides on how to do popular education. And maybe after we finish, like at the end, we start to realize why. And I highly appreciate that there was no guides. But what we could find was the essence of popular education. And here I'm sharing 4 main points that helped us structure popular education or develop it as a content during our work with the campaign. So the first thing about the essence of popular education is that there is no expert in the learning process. And by that we mean we are all equal in the learning process. Nobody has to claim that they have a guidebook to teach us about justice. We all learn more about justice, and we shared stories now in the breakout rooms on when did we learn about justice. So there's no expert. No one is the only one who owns it all when it comes to knowledge. And that takes us to the second essence of popular education. It draws on personal experiences as a source of knowledge. And in personal experiences and during my presentation, I'm going to talk more about how did we manage to ask people about personal experiences. But our stories, our life is our resource of knowledge, and that is what we highlight in personal experience. The third essence is that it is an intentional active learning. It is not a normal chit chat between friends discussing justice. It has to be intentional. It has to lead me to reflect more and think more about justice and how, for example, justice, and how do I practice it in my life if I am fighting for a right, or as a woman, or as a teacher, and so on. So it has to be intentional. It's not just a normal conversation. And the fourth part of the essence of popular education is that it stimulates action, whether the action is individual or collective. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now I'm going to focus more on what did we do? Like, how did we manage to do it based on the four points around the essence of popular education. And everything I'm going to share now is from our experience with Stand Up with the Teachers campaign from 2017 till 2019, when we implemented popular education and tried it. The first thing I want to talk about in the structure is how does it look like from the outside. It looks like the structure of a snowflake in community organizing. And in the middle here, when you look at it, it says founding team. We call it in popular education the facilitation team. This facilitation team is similar to the founding team. Each two teachers become facilitators of one learning circle. And they have to meet regularly every month to discuss topics that are related to their life, to these concepts that we could reflect on and learn more about. So if you look at it, there has to be a regular meeting. We call it a regular learning circle every month. Every month we discuss a topic, and two facilitators recruit and create their own learning circles of teachers. We managed to reach to 3 more cities because of popular education, and we reached to, I will talk more about the impact, but this is how it looks like. It's a structure of a snowflake having a facilitation team and learning circles from the outside. But what do we do in the learning circles is the other part that I want to focus more in the structure of popular education. So next slide. Yeah. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to take you into a journey to try to visualize with me what happens inside a learning circle. But before I go to that part, because there is no expert in popular education, the topics you see in this slide are topics that were decided by the teachers. The only thing that is fixed in the topics we discuss in popular education is the first learning circle, where teachers share their stories on when did they act for their rights as women. And this session is always fixed as session number 1 in our popular education. What also comes out of the first session is a list of topics where teachers want and would like to reflect more and discuss more. Most of the sessions that appeared along the way were around power, people, and self. In self, for example, we talked about love, we talked about self-care, we talked about relationships. Other parts or another theme that kept on repeating was power, how to deal with power, silence in the face of power, how to say no, how to have a conversation with someone who has a higher power dynamic than I do, in that case, the teacher and the owner of the school. Also, we had topics that were about justice, trust, accountability, and people power. Some of these topics were repeated many times. One fixed topic is always the first session that is about their stories on when did they act as women, because we were in the context of women who are fighting for their rights. Now I'll take you to the structure of a learning circle. What happens inside a learning circle? So next slide, please. A learning circle can be 2 hours, it can be 3 hours. I personally don't prefer that it takes more than 3 hours. The number of people participating in a learning circle, in our experience, has always been between 6 to 8 people in each learning circle. What happens inside the learning circle is the following. We always start with a check-in question. And in the check-in question, we ask a question that is also related to the topic of the topic that we're discussing. So now I'm going to take you to imagine with me what happened when we talked about how to deal with power. So we started off with a check-in question, for example, that was related to the topic, name a person that you know had power over you, and what happened, what was it about, for example. Or we can ask something different about the check-in. I will talk about check-ins later on. Let me start with sharing the stories. So we open the circle, we have a check-in question, we remember the topic. And then after that, we go to sharing story moments. And by sharing story moments, we use questions that we usually use in public narrative. So for example, in the session of how to deal with power, we asked the question of recall a moment in your life when you were in a situation when somebody had power over you. What was it? How did you act? What happened? And how did you feel? We give people some time to reflect and remember moments. And then we share stories. After we share stories, we do a conceptualization exercise. Conceptualization is a critical thinking competency, and I will talk about it as I conclude the circle now. But in conceptualization, we go back to the words, the concepts that came out from our stories, for example, authority, words like power, and so on. And we sit and redefine them and conceptualize them as basing it on our personal stories. So we spend some time after sharing stories defining or redefining these concepts. One of the words that came out from the stories was authority, for example. So we put time and we define it. After we finish the conceptualization exercise, there's no expert, and so there's not a person who has the right to set the agenda for the discussion. So what we do is we do a problematization exercise. It is also a critical thinking competency where we generate questions. We generate questions where we want to have a discussion problematizing what is happening around us. And I would always ask people, for example, or the facilitators would always ask people, okay, now that we finished the conceptualization exercise and we redefined authority, I want us to think of a question. This is a burning question, a question that you think we would learn more if we discussed it or reflected more around it. So they put a list of questions on the topic, how to deal with power. They can also draw on their personal experiences, the stories that they've shared. After we list the questions, we open up the discussion. And in that discussion, the only thing that happens from the facilitator is giving the mic to everyone, people discussing, summarizing some points, taking people from one question to another if people answered or reflected on a question, and there's time now to move on to another question and so on. So we have a discussion. That discussion could be 1 hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes, and so on. After we finish the discussion, we ask about a commitment. And the commitment here is a behavioral change commitment. So for example, we go back to the teachers in the room and we would ask them, okay, take 30 seconds to commit to something. What is it? A change in your behavior if next time somebody who has higher power is dealing with you. Like, what will change in your behavior so that you deal with power differently next time? And here we specifically ask about an action. We don't ask about a perception change. We ask about an action that a teacher could do in her life, whether as a woman, as a mother, or as a as part of the campaign. So we ask about a behavioral change commitment, and then we close up the session with a reflection. What did we learn? Deltas and pluses. I'll go back to the check-in. Because I mentioned earlier that we meet once a month and people end up the session by sharing commitments of behavioral changes they want to implement in their lives. The following session, check-in, will always start with checking in on the commitments. So we ask the teachers, did you face any moment where somebody was using power against you? Yes, no. If yes, what happened? What did you do? What changed or not? And so we always keep a record of this behavioral change and these commitments that the teachers take. And we check the check-in is always about this commitment part that we do at the end of the discussion. Next slide. Yeah, concluding the structure and concluding what happens inside the learning circle. And I mentioned critical thinking competencies. We in AHL always have these opportunities of learning, and we met Isabelle Mion. She's from France and she teaches on critical thinking. And as a team, we were taking a workshop with her and she taught us about the 4 competencies of critical thinking, 2 of which were implemented in popular education. And why or how, we would always ask ourselves a question like, does that competency align with popular education essence or not? So in conceptualization, when people reflect on a definition of a word, for example, and redefine it, they are creating their own learning around it. The problematization competency also, they are generating questions and problematizing the issue or the concept that we're discussing. So we put that as part of our learning circle as we went on and on with implementing the popular education. In conclusion, next slide, Sachiko, please. What were the learning methodologies that we used that also aligns with popular education essence? Public narrative, asking about story moments, was a practice that would always align with popular education because we draw on personal stories and experiences. Critical thinking competencies of conceptualization and problematization, I've just mentioned how can they align because they help people set the agenda and they are the ones who are thinking and problematizing the issue or the concept that we're discussing. Facilitation of the discussion, we work more on our facilitation skills, but also we work on the facilitator modeling the essence of popular education along the way when discussing or facilitating the discussion. Commitment and behavioral change, we think that it is related to agency, and it works. It worked with us when we asked people to take a commitment, a behavioral change commitment, and share with us what happens with that commitment. So these are the learning methodologies that we used in order to um, design the learning circle discussions. Next slide. Because success and impact. The first thing I mentioned today was that we met the challenge of recruitment and reaching to teachers to be part of the campaign. By 2019, we recruited 34 teachers who became the facilitators throughout 4 cycles of popular education. We expanded the campaign into 5 cities, not only one city in Jordan. We've discussed around 12 topics, and we reached 160 teachers in 2 years. And that helped us grow the campaign, find leadership, and some of the teachers who were part of the popular education are now taking leadership roles in the campaign. So in a way or another, I can say that it worked. Now I want to share with you some stories, success stories about from popular education. Next slide. Yeah, I'm gonna share 3 stories that we learned about in our evaluation sessions of popular education. One story, like a success story on the level of a woman as a woman. Another level was a teacher in the school, or a community of teachers in one school or in the campaign. So I will start with, as a woman, because we ask in the check-in what happened in the commitment, what did you do, and so on. Here comes Hayat, a young lady in Zarqa city, who told everyone in the circle that she broke up with her fiance. And when we asked her what happened and why did you make that decision, she said, when we discussed last time the session of how to deal with power and how to say no to things that do not align with my values, I just couldn't stop my mind about thinking of what is the relationship I'm part of now. I can't live with this person. And I made that decision that I can't get married to this man. And so she decided not to get married to her fiance. And to us, when we asked her, she said the session helped me and that exercise helped me, and so on. On the level of teachers, I remember Safiya, who would always implement what happens in the circles in the classrooms. So she teaches English to 2nd graders. The first week of school, she had them set the norms of the class. They were the ones to set the norms. She would always start off the day with a question with them about, for example, what makes you happy? What made you happy today? And she started asking these students questions about their life. And she changed everything about her teaching methodologies, basing it on norm setting, asking the students about how they feel about things. And Safiya kept her job every year because she was a very special teacher in her school. As a community of teachers, we had 3 teachers in a learning circle who work in the same school. And they also had communication channels with the founding team of the campaign. After we talked about how to deal with power, and in parallel to what the campaign was working on, an action asking school owners to transfer salaries to banks, these 3 teachers recruited all their colleagues, 15 teachers, another 15 teachers, and they decided to ask for their salaries to be transferred to the banks. And they got what they wanted. They didn't only ask for their salaries to be transferred to the bank, but also they took the minimum wage before that, they didn't take the minimum wage in Jordan in their campaign. And when we asked them in the evaluation session, they also said, we felt that we are part of learning circles where we always commit to making change. Why not take a further step and make change in the school if we can do it? And when we asked them what session helped you, they also told us about the sessions when we reflected more on power and equity. I would love to leave you with these sessions, with these stories now, and maybe we can open it for questions. Sachiko, right? Are we good on time?
Yep, we're good on time. We also have a couple more minutes if you have anything you want to say more before we go into.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Oh dear.
It's clear, no? I can hear Sachiko.
I can hear you, Sachiko.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Am I good now? Okay, great. Yeah, we have we're good to go with questions. Otherwise, we have a couple more minutes if you want to wrap up your part, Rahaf, with any comments too.
I personally learned a lot from this experience. And every single time I used to plan for any session with the teachers, I would ask myself, like, if Paulo Freire was in the room, and actually Nisreen once asked me this question, if Paulo Freire was in the room, would he say that this is popular education or not? And that is why we always kept the essence that I mentioned at the beginning ahead of us when we were developing the structure of the circles or the structure of the general atmosphere of the learning sessions. So if I would say anything was that I would always put the essence ahead of me when I plan for anything with the teachers. And at the same time, I would always ask myself, like, if I am not an expert, then I have to learn from these sessions, as well as every teacher in the room. And I remember that in the discussion, when we discussed trust, I learned a lot personally, and I made changes in my life regarding trust. So I learned a lot during this journey, and now we are working with 60 youth on toxic masculinity. We're implementing popular education, discussing toxic masculinity. We don't have a campaign. We're just experiencing popular education out of contexts of campaigns. It worked with us with Stand Up with the Teachers campaign. We want to now test it if it works without a campaign, a now campaign, I mean. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing.